Hi, I'm Russ Grieve, a member of the Hopkinton Historical Society and a history hobbyist. Welcome to Hopkinton Treasures. At the recent Hopkinton 101 event that was held at the high school gym, I was working as a volunteer at a historical society table, and I engaged in conversation with 3 Hopkinton High School sophomores. They were interested to learn that in 1879, you had to pass a test in order to get into high school, not to pass MCAS to get out of high school with a diploma. They were particularly interested in one of the questions. There was a little bit of Anglophilia here about geography, asking you to name all of the bodies of water that somebody leaving from Liverpool and getting to Bombay in India had to pass through. We chatted for a while about history, and I asked them if they were going to be doing anything with history, and they said, well, I think we're going to come up with World War II pretty soon. And after they had left, that made me think of when I grew up as a young kid. I thought how World War II was so important growing up to us in the 1940s. As a teenage milkman in 1938, my uncle ran in the marathon, probably his first visit to Hopkinton. Later, being a Marine veteran, he received a book later on, and its title was The Old Breed, and it was a history of the United States 1st Marine Division in World War II. I read that book from cover to cover as a young boy, and as a young boy, I was filled with the idea of battlefield heroics and iconic figures. Rereading the first 3 chapters of The Old Breed decades later, I came to think of those times a few years before and 8 months after Pearl Harbor. There were wars in Europe and Asia. America had a tiny armed force, less than 500,000 people. And they were very poorly supported financially. And a military draft was introduced late in 1940. 70-plus years later, my simple boyhood views have been replaced with an appreciation of what those U.S. Marines did before the war and what they did just to get into the fight after Pearl Harbor. This talk is not about horrific battlefields and the heroics of the battlefield. It is about what those men did under adverse conditions with limited resources and not enough time to do them. Endurance, perseverance, ingenuity, and performance. Those are the virtues that carried them forward. I invite you to travel back in time with me so that you may appreciate that critical time in our history. Now, please use your imagination. It's important. 1940. Mass communication was primitive by today's standards. Radio, movies, newspapers were the vehicles to communicate widely with people. Teletypes worked at 60 words per minute. Typists used carbon paper and paper, loads of paper, to retype and send letters. There was no TV. I repeat, no TV. No word processors, no internet, no Google, no personal computers, no smartphones. Now, the military runs on orders, using tons of paper and thousands of typists to produce them. Merchant ships rolled along at a leisurely 15 to 20 miles per hour. It'd be like 15 to 19 knots. Carrying bulk cargo. Bulk cargo means you got to lift it out of the hole and move it. The container ships hadn't been invented, and they won't be invented for another 16 years. In 1940, the U.S. was emerging from the Great Depression. Europe was at war. France had fallen to Germany. Britain was besieged and standing alone. China and Japan had been fighting for 4 years. The U.S. has instituted a military draft late in 1940, despite deep misgivings about getting into another war. The future looked dark. The Marines were establishing a new base at New River, North Carolina. This was to be for training in amphibious assault operations, how to get off ships into small craft and land on hostile beaches in an efficient manner. That was a concept promoted by a Marine general in the 1930s. Like anyone pushing a new and costly venture or an idea, it was a long, hard sell for him. His name was John Lejeune. Now, in 1940, the Marines were calling up their own reserves for training. 1941. On February 1st, 1941, the 1st Marine Division was activated as a piece of paper on board the USS Texas on its way to Gitmo Bay in Cuba. It consisted of 2 small regiments and a number of other small units. Later that day, the 2nd Marine Division was similar condition, was activated on the West Coast, and this was 10 months before Pearl Harbor. This new base was 112,000 acres of water, swamp, coastal plain, sand flies, ticks, chiggers, and snakes. It was called Marine Barracks New River, but there were no barracks. The shelter was called Tent City. Drafty wooden floors stuffed with newspapers and things by the occupants to keep out the cold. Each tent was heated with a kerosene stove, which often belched soot covering the occupants, and fires were commonplace. Training was never-ending and intense, particularly from June to August, culminating in fleet exercises. The place was hard to get in and out of, and consequently liberty was granted very few times to the fellows. In early July, a brigade of U.S. Marines, primarily the 6th Regiment, was called from California through the Panama Canal and landed in Iceland to relieve British troops needed elsewhere. This was 5 months before Pearl Harbor. It's a complicated story and not part of this talk, but I just thought I would mention it, the fact that they had to travel from the West Coast to the East Coast. On October 31st, the USS Reuben James, a destroyer of U.S. destroyer, was torpedoed and sunk by a German U-boat. When Pearl Harbor was declared, was attacked on Sunday, December 7, 1941, the 1st Marine Division had only 518 officers and 6,871 men. Pretty small, but new boats began to pour in, and the NCOs were busy training them, going to turn them into real Marines. There were lots of reorganizations where units were being split up and combined and then create other things. It was really kind of crazy administratively. 1942, early March, General Alexander Vandergrift was appointed commander of the 1st Marine Division, which was not expected to fight before January 1st, 1943, 9 months away. That spring, the only U.S. strike force available was 15,000 Marines. Why? Because they were all volunteers. The men drafted in 1940 and 41 couldn't be sent overseas unless the war was declared, which had only been declared a couple of months earlier. They were still in training. On mid-April, orders were given to go to Wellington, New Zealand. That's halfway across the world. It's called Lone Wolf. They had to get the equipment, they had to load the equipment on the ships, and they had to organize a convoy. So by the end of April, the men were on trains to go to Norfolk, which was going to be the port of embarkation for the troops. By 19 May, the troops were on 2 ships, along with the general, One of the ships was called Wakefield, which had half of the troops, and the rest were on Ericsson, a former Swedish cruise ship called Kungsholm. So I've got a little factoid for you. Factoid means it's not part of the story, but it's kind of interesting. The factoid, you may have heard of J.D. Salinger. He was the author of Catcher in the Rye. And he was kind of a noted introvert. He didn't do much of anything with people. But he had a job on this Kungsholm, and he was the entertainment director. Talk about misplaced job. And the very next day, on 20 May, the fleet heads to Panama in convoy, and they were not combat loaded because essentially it was a transfer from one base to another halfway across the world. Some of the men on board, when they arrived in Wellington, on board the Ericsson, had lost as much as 16 pounds because of the poor food. And then they found that the dock workers in Wellington, there's a war on now, and the dock workers were on strike. And I bring up the subject of bulk cargo again. 6 days later, General Vandergrift was called to a meeting in Auckland, New Zealand, 300 miles away, to meet with his boss, Admiral Gormley, commander of the Southwest Pacific. He expected to be discussing training for readiness in January 1943. Instead, he was handed a joint combined staff order about a landing on Guadalcanal on August 1, 37 days away. I want to read this. It's almost like a fictional, my interpretation of this meeting. Okay, so General Grant, who's going to do this? And the Admiral says, the 1st Marine Division. He says, well, how long have I got here? He said, well, 1 August. It's 37 days away. Well, my second echelon is not going to be here until 11 July. Well, then we got to load and unload for combat style. And look, the concentration in the Fijis is 6 days away by transport. And then in Coro, in Fijis, it's 7 days from the objective on water. That means I got 24 days to recon, get information, study the terrain, make decisions, issue orders, and load 31 transports and cargo carriers, and embark 20,000 men, 60 days supply, and rendezvous with naval forces to conduct joint set of exercises. My division headquarters combat team have just arrived in New Caledonia. They're 700 miles away. The 3rd Defense Battalion is at Pearl Harbor, along with the naval support forces. The only information the Navy's got is a hydrographic chart made in 1910. On 28 June, the first operation orders were issued. Division organized in 300-man work parties, 24 hours a day, 8-hour shifts. It was bedlam loading this stuff, offloading ships, reloading, sorting. It was winter. We were down in Wellington. It's winter. It's Antarctica. Cold, wet, rainy, coming down in sheets. Tons, cartons of waterlogged cigarettes, drifts of mushy cornflakes and candy. Thousands of sea ration cans are rolling around on the dock. Trucks and men jammed the quay, the dock. Moving around is very difficult, yet they got the job done. Now elsewhere, the Japanese on 6 July were starting to construct an airfield, which we later called Henderson Field on Guadalcanal. 3 days later, the embarkation orders were issued for our troops, and D-Day was given another extra week. D-Day was going to be 7 August. On 11 July, most of the 1st Marines arrived at a nearby port, and it was bedlam, because their supplies had to be taken ashore and then sorted and inventoried and then reloaded. So 11 days on 22 July, 11 days after the Marines arrived, which the destination was Coro in the Fiji Islands for exercises. Left behind were tons of supplies and heavy artillery. 28 July. Coral was a big mistake. Beaches of coral were there instead of sand. They couldn't land the troops. Lots of damaged boats, the propellers and sides. They practiced just going over the side of ships in those cargo nets that you see in those pictures of World War II often. On 7 August, Marines landed on Guadalcanal. There were 956 officers, 18,146 men. They were equipped with 17 days rations, 4 days ammunition. They had the old Springfield rifles instead of the new M1s. They had to carry their machine guns with 100-pound water-cooled heavy machine guns. Many of their Higgins boats, the landing craft, didn't have the ramps, the familiar ramps we all had. They hadn't been all introduced. They were just a recent introduction. All the above was done just to get to the battlefield, a monument to endurance, overcoming challenges, and dedicated to duty. 2 nights after the Marines landed, the U.S. Navy suffered a disastrous defeat in the Battle of Savo Island, losing 4 heavy cruisers and over 1,000 men. The fleet withdrew before the supply ships were completely unloaded. The Marines fought on, being supplied sporadically, until relieved on December 8, 1942. After his death in 1942, the New River, North Carolina base was renamed Camp Lejeune. On this Memorial Day, I attended the dedication of the World War II monument on the Common. There are 416 names on it. There were only 2,697 people in Hopkinton at the time, 1940. At least 6 of those names were named Marines fighting on Iwo Jima 3 years later in 1945. Others were on ships offshore. That's the story so far. You'll know all the rest in the history books. So what would I title this talk? Maybe Preparing for War and Getting Ready to Enter the History Books. Thank you.
I'm John Palmer. I'm here with the Hopkinton Historical Society. We're located on 168 Hayden Row Street.
Hello, I'm Judy Weinthaler, and I'm on the board of the Hopkinton Emergency Fund. We're a 501c3 to help people with financial emergencies. We're asking your support and help in spreading the word, and be in touch if we can provide more information. In conjunction with the Hopkinton Women's Club, we are doing, yes, one more golf tournament.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Dinsmore. I am the founder and president of the Hopkinton Freedom Team. What we do is offer a safe and confidential space for anyone who has experienced any sort of bias. If you have any questions or want further information, you can reach us at our website at hopkintonfreedomteam.org. And we have our 3rd annual Pride event happening June 11th. We're collaborating with the Hopkinton Center for the Arts and the Hopkinton Youth and Family Services.
We are Greyhound Friends. Our mission is to rescue greyhounds and other sight hounds from around the world. If you'd like to come adopt one, please visit our shelter at 167 Saddle Hill Road.
We're celebrating our 40th anniversary.
The Sustainable Green Committee is a group of 15 people working hard to help Hopkinton address the serious environmental issues facing us. We develop plans and practical solutions to help save not only our special slice of the planet, but also help save residents, businesses, and municipal organizations money. Double green power. This includes a municipal aggregation plan, so our electricity comes from green supplies, a climate action plan to help us meet the state's net zero carbon emissions target, and so much more. We also provide useful information on green topics. Our website, hopgreen.org, aims to be a one-stop spot for links to some of the best resources out there on solar, EVs, waste reduction, heating, and safe natural resource management. Our social media and email lists help to keep anyone who wants to be informed about everything we're doing, as well as the latest green news. We're always looking for help, so contact us if you'd like to work on this important mission. Thank you.
Solar power is a free gift from the universe. You'll be very surprised at how many programs there are that offer rebates and information for you to save money on your business and your home. You owe it to yourself to find out more information. Go to the website www.mass.gov/solar-information-programs. Many businesses around town are already taking advantage of solar power. Ask your neighbors what they think. You're saving money and you're saving the planet. Life doesn't get more simple than that. And next member up, we have Frisbee, the green-minded frog. Tell me, Frisbee, how did you come by that moniker?
Well, Bob, what goes around comes around, especially on our beautiful #1 planet Earth. Because remember, we have no planet B.
Righto. So, Frisbee, anything you'd like to croak about tonight? Any bug in your bonnet?
As a matter of fact, there is, Bob. And the name of that bug begins with the letter L for litter. And it's not rocket science how to fix it. You just pick it up. I'll show you. Better yet, don't throw it in the first place.
Especially since most of it is that curse of the universe, plastic.
I get you, Frizz. I never commit that abomination. I always recycle.
Well, Bob, I hate to burst the bubble we've been in, but it turns out it's a myth that recycling is the cure-all. In fact, 95% of it never gets recycled.
So what's an upstanding citizen to do?
So, just don't buy it in the first place. In fact, there are plenty of alternatives out there if you only look. In fact, I, for one, use super duper compostable bamboo dental floss. I'm telling you, it gets the flies out between my teeth really neat. And just say no to those clamshell takeout containers. They're taking over the real clamshells in the ocean. And not only that, they're mucking up my home sweet swamp.
Do you have your own container?
I certainly do. Just bring your own reusable green container, or red as the case may be. It holds plenty.
Well, that's the echo view from the lily pad of Frisbee the green-minded frog. How about a game of Frisbee, Frisbee?
You're on, Bob.
Bad catch.
This is Kathy Young. Our family has lived in Hopkinton for about 8 years. So a couple of years ago, my kid pushed me to do the home composting. And I reluctant doing so because of the too much extra work. Of course, I got the lectures from my kid and we started doing it. And I'm really surprised that how much trash has been reduced just by simply doing the composting. 2/3 of my trash were gone. Since then, I got into learning about and advocating for the sustainability, and I joined the Sustainable Green Committee to work alongside others, contributing into all these aspects. So I was really inspired by the new generation and welcome more young people join the efforts.
Only 34% of children are highly resilient. These findings come from the Cigna Resilience Index. The MRP Project's Raising Resilient Kids program is for parents who want to ensure their child can positively and productively overcome life's obstacles.
In the 6-week series, we'll highlight the essential role obstacles play in children's development. Each class focuses on one topic, and the facilitators provide time for problem solving and group discussion. We also spend time during the first couple of sessions discussing ourselves and our own resilience. We can't expect our children to be resilient unless we're modeling resilient behaviors for them.
One of our recent participants said, "I walked away from this series with new language to use with my children and to help guide them through situations they may encounter in everyday life growing up. I am truly grateful for the discussions, encouragement, and guidance that this series provided." If you want to sign up, visit themrpproject.org